this video, we are going to explore a country that is the largest archipelago in the world and is a paradise that tourists choose as their travel destination. So watch this interesting video till the end. Hello. Hope you are doing well. In this video, we are going to explore Indonesia, which is the largest archipelago in the world and a paradise for foreign tourists, about its history, culture, economy, language, weather, and everything we need to know about it. A very beautiful and amazing country in Southeast Asia. If you are interested in this kind of content, please subscribe to Farman's Life channel, and by pressing the bell on the side, you will be notified as soon as the next video is released. We are very glad that you are with us in this video. Indonesia, officially the Republic of Indonesia, is a transcontinental country spanning the southeast part of Asia and western part of Oceania between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It consists of over 17,000 islands, including Sumatra, Java, Sulawesi, and parts of Borneo and New Guinea. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelagic state and the 14th largest country by area, at 1,904,569 square kilometers. With over 275 million people, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country and the most populous Muslim-majority country. Java, the world's most populous island, is home to more than half of the country's population. Indonesia is a presidential republic with an elected legislature. It has 38 provinces, of which 9 have special status. The country's capital, Jakarta, is the world's second most populous urban area. Indonesia shares land borders with Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and the eastern part of Malaysia, as well as maritime borders with Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Australia, Palau, and India. Despite its large population and densely populated regions, Indonesia has vast areas of wilderness that support one of the world's highest levels of biodiversity. The Indonesian archipelago has been a valuable region for trade since at least the 7th century, when the Srivijaya kingdom formed trade links with China. Indonesian history has been influenced by foreign powers drawn to its natural resources. Under Indian influence, Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms flourished from the early centuries CE. Muslim traders later brought Islam, and European powers fought one another to monopolize trade in the Spice Islands of Maluku during the Age of Discovery. Following 3.5 centuries of Dutch colonialism, Indonesia secured its independence after World War II. Indonesia's history has since been turbulent, with challenges posed by natural disasters, corruption, separatism, a democratization process, and periods of rapid economic change. Indonesia consists of thousands of distinct native ethnic and hundreds of linguistic groups, with Javanese being the largest. A shared identity has developed with the motto Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, literally, many, yet one, defined by a national language, cultural diversity, religious pluralism within a Muslim-majority population, and a history of colonialism and rebellion against it. The economy of Indonesia is the world's 17th largest by nominal GDP and the 7th largest by PPP. It is a regional power and is considered a middle power in global affairs. The country is a member of several multilateral organizations, including the United Nations, World Trade Organization, G20, and a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, East Asia Summit, D8, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The name Indonesia derives from the Greek words Indos and Nisos, meaning Indian Islands. The name dates back to the 19th century, far predating the formation of independent Indonesia. Indonesia, a transcontinental country spanning Southeast Asia and Oceania, it is the world's largest archipelagic state, extending 5,120 kilometers from east to west and 1,760 kilometers from north to south. Indonesia has 17,504 islands, with 16,056 registered at the UN, scattered over both sides of the equator, around 6,000 of which are inhabited. The largest are Sumatra, Java, Borneo, shared with Brunei and Malaysia, Sulawesi, and New Guinea, shared with Papua New Guinea. At 4,884 meters, Puncak Jaya is Indonesia's highest peak, and Lake Toba in Sumatra is the largest lake, with an area of 1,145 square kilometers. Indonesia's largest rivers are in Kalimantan and New Guinea and include Kapuas, Barito, Mamberamo, Sepik, and Mahakam. They serve as communication and transport links between the island's river settlements. Indonesia lies along the equator, and its climate tends to be relatively even year-round. Indonesia has two seasons, a wet season and a dry season, with no extremes of summer or winter. For most of Indonesia, the dry season falls between May and October, with the wet season between November and April. Indonesia's climate is almost entirely tropical, dominated by the tropical rainforest climate found on every large island of Indonesia. More cooling climate types do exist in mountainous regions that are 1,300 to 1,500 meters above sea level. The oceanic climate prevails in highland areas adjacent to rainforest climates, with reasonably uniform precipitation year-round. In highland areas near the tropical monsoon and tropical savanna climates, the subtropical highland climate is prevalent with a more pronounced dry season. Some regions, such as Kalimantan and Sumatra, experience only slight differences in rainfall and temperature between the seasons, whereas others, such as Nusa Tenggara, experience far more pronounced differences with droughts in the dry season and floods in the wet. Rainfall varies across regions, with more in western Sumatra, Java, and the interiors of Kalimantan and Papua, and less in areas closer to Australia, such as Nusa Tenggara, which tends to be dry. The almost uniformly warm waters that constitute 81% of Indonesia's area ensure that land temperatures remain relatively constant. Humidity is quite high, at between 70 and 90%. Winds are moderate and generally predictable, with monsoons usually blowing in from the south and east in June through October and from the northwest in November through March. Typhoons and large-scale storms pose little hazard to mariners. Significant dangers come from swift currents in channels, such as the Lombok and Sape Straits. Several studies consider Indonesia to be at severe risk from the projected effects of climate change. These include unreduced emissions resulting in an average temperature rise of around 1 degree Celsius by mid-century, raising the frequency of drought and food shortages, with an impact on precipitation and the patterns of wet and dry seasons, and thus Indonesia's agriculture system, as well as numerous diseases and wildfires. Rising sea levels would also threaten most of Indonesia's population, who live in low-lying coastal areas. Impoverished communities would likely be affected the most by climate change. Tectonically, most of Indonesia's area is highly unstable, making it a site of numerous volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. It lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where the Indo-Australian Plate and the Pacific Plate are pushed under the Eurasian Plate, where they melt at about 100 kilometers deep. A string of volcanoes runs through Sumatra, Java, Bali, and Nusa Tenggara, and then to the Banda Islands of Maluku to northeastern Sulawesi. Of the 400 volcanoes, around 130 are active. Between 1972 and 1991, there were 29 volcanic eruptions, mostly on Java. Volcanic ash has made agricultural conditions unpredictable in some areas. However, it has also resulted in fertile soils, a factor in historically sustaining the high population densities of Java and Bali. Indonesia is a republic with a presidential system. Following the fall of the New Order in 1998, political and governmental structures have undergone sweeping reforms, with 4 constitutional amendments revamping the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Chief among them is the delegation of power and authority to various regional entities while remaining a unitary state. The President of Indonesia is the head of state and head of government, Commander-in-Chief of the Indonesian National Armed Forces, Tentara Nasional Indonesia, TNI, and the Director of Domestic Governance, Policymaking, and Foreign Affairs. Jakarta has the most extended bus rapid transit system globally, boasting 251.2 kilometers in 13 corridors and 10 cross-corridor routes. Rickshaws such as Bajaj and Becak and shared taxis such as Angkot and Metro Mini are a regular sight in the country. Most railways are in Java, used for freight and passenger transport, such as local commuter rail services, mainly in Jakarta and Yogyakarta, Solo, complementing the intercity rail network in several cities. Indonesia's largest airport, Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, is among the busiest in the Southern Hemisphere. Ngurah Rai International Airport and Juanda International Airport are the country's second and third busiest airport, respectively. Garuda Indonesia is one of the world's leading airlines and a member of the Global Airline Alliance SkyTeam. The port of Tanjung Priok is the busiest and most advanced Indonesian port, handling more than 50% of Indonesia's transshipment cargo traffic. Tourism contributed around $9.8 billion to GDP in 2020, and in 2019, Indonesia received 15.4 million visitors. Overall, China, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and Japan are the top 5 sources of visitors to Indonesia. Raja Ampat Islands, West Papua, has the highest recorded level of diversity in marine life. Nature and culture are prime attractions of Indonesian tourism. The country has a well-preserved natural ecosystem with rainforests stretching over about 57% of Indonesia's land, 225 million acres. Forests on Sumatra and Kalimantan are examples of popular destinations, such as the Orangutan Wildlife Reserve. Moreover, Indonesia has one of the world's longest coastlines, measuring 54,716 kilometers. The ancient Borobudur and Prambanan temples, as well as Toraja and Bali with their traditional festivities, are some of the popular destinations for cultural tourism. Indonesia has 9 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, including the Komodo National Park and the Sawalunto Coal Mine, and a further 19 in a tentative list that includes Bunikan National Park and Raja Ampat Islands. Other attractions include specific points in Indonesian history, such as the colonial heritage of the Dutch East Indies in the old towns of Jakarta and Semarang and the royal palaces of Pagaruyung, Ubud, and Yogyakarta. Indonesia is an ethnically diverse country, with around 1,300 distinct native ethnic groups. Most Indonesians are descended from Austronesian peoples whose languages had origins in Proto-Austronesian, which possibly originated in what is now Taiwan. Another major grouping is the Melanesians, who inhabit eastern Indonesia, the Maluku Islands, western New Guinea and the eastern part of the Lesser Sunda Islands. The Javanese are the largest ethnic group, constituting 40.2% of the population, and are politically dominant. They are predominantly located in the central to eastern parts of Java and also in sizable numbers in most provinces. The Sundanese are the next largest group, 15.4%, followed by Batak, Madurese, Bitoy, Minangkabau, Bugis, and Malay people. A sense of Indonesian nationhood exists alongside strong regional identities. Despite guaranteeing religious freedom in the constitution, the government officially recognizes only 6 religions: Islam, Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, with indigenous religions only partly acknowledged. With 231 million adherents, 86.7%, in 2018, Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim majority country, with Sunnis being the majority, 99%. The Shias and Ahmadis, respectively, constitute 1% and 0.2% of Muslims. About 10% of Indonesians are Christians, who form the majority in 7 provinces in eastern Indonesia. Most Hindus are Balinese, and most Buddhists are Chinese Indonesians. The cultural history of the Indonesian archipelago spans more than 2 millennia. Influences from the Indian subcontinent, mainland China, the Middle East, Europe, Melanesian and Austronesian peoples have historically shaped the cultural, linguistic and religious makeup of the archipelago. As a result, modern-day Indonesia has a multicultural, multilingual and multi-ethnic society, with a complex cultural mixture that differs significantly from the original indigenous cultures. Indonesia currently holds 12 items of UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage, including a wayang puppet theater, kris, batik, pencak silat, angklung, gamelan, and the 3 genres of traditional Balinese dance. Badminton and football are the most popular sports in Indonesia. Indonesia is among the few countries that have won the Thomas and Uber Cup, the World Team Championship of men's and women's badminton. Along with weightlifting, it is the sport that contributes the most to Indonesia's Olympic medal tally. Liga 1 is the country's premier football club league. On the international stage, Indonesia was the first Asian team to participate in the FIFA World Cup in 1938 as the Dutch East Indies. On a regional level, Indonesia won a bronze medal at the 1958 Asian Games as well as 2 gold medals at the 1987 and 1991 Southeast Asian Games, SEA Games. Indonesia's first appearance at the AFC Asian Cup was in 1996 and successfully qualified for a total of 5 tournaments, although they never make the knockout phase. Other popular sports include boxing and basketball, which has a long history in Indonesia and was part of the first national games, Pekan Olahraga Nasional, PON, in 1948. Indonesia has a mixed economy in which the private sector and government play vital roles. As the only G20 member state in Southeast Asia, the country has the largest economy in the region and is classified as a newly industrialized country. In 2022, it is the world's 17th largest economy by nominal GDP and 7th in terms of GDP at PPP, is $1.289 trillion and $4.023 trillion, respectively. Per capita GDP in PPP is $14,638, while nominal per capita GDP is $4,691. Services are the economy's largest sector and account for 43.4% of GDP, followed by industry, 39.7%, and agriculture, 12.8%. Since 2009, it has employed more people than other sectors, accounting for 47.7% of the total labor force, followed by agriculture, 30.2%, and industry, 21.9%. Indonesia has abundant natural resources. Its primary industries are fishing, petroleum, timber, paper products, cotton cloth, tourism, petroleum mining, natural gas, bauxite, coal, and tin. Its main agricultural products are rice, coconuts, soybeans, bananas, coffee, tea, palm, rubber, and sugarcane. These commodities make up a large portion of the country's exports, with palm oil and coal briquettes as the leading export commodities. In addition to refined and crude petroleum as the primary imports, telephones, vehicle parts and wheat cover the majority of additional imports. China, the United States, Japan, Singapore, India, Malaysia, South Korea and Thailand are Indonesia's principal export markets and import partners. In the following, we describe the 5 countries that have the most trade relations with Indonesia. Number 1. Indonesia and China. China is Indonesia's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade surpassing $100 billion in 2021, up by 58.6% year-on-year. China has been a major market for Indonesia's products such as palm oil, coal, steel, birds' nests, coffee and tropical fruits, and is now further buoyed by the RCEP deal. Indonesia's ranking as an exporting country to China among other ASEAN member countries continues to climb, from previously being in 5th position in 2019, rising to 4th position in 2020, and in 2021 increasing again to 3rd rank. The value of Indonesia's exports to China in 2021 reached $63.63 billion, growing 70.02% compared to the total value of Indonesia's exports to China in 2020. Meanwhile, the value of Indonesia's imports from China in this period also grew positively by 47.87% or reached $60.71 billion compared to last year's total import value, dominated by the raw or auxiliary materials needed to boost the productivity of the domestic industry. The main products that Indonesia exported to China were ferroalloys, coal briquettes, and palm oil. The main products that China exported to Indonesia are telephones, broadcasting equipment, and computers. Also, China is the second largest investor in Indonesia after Singapore, whose investment in the country reached $6.7 billion in the first half of 2020 year. Number 2. Indonesia and U.S. Indonesia is a vital partner in the Indo-Pacific region, and U.S.-Indonesia relations have taken on increasing importance. United States and Indonesia initiated in 2010 a comprehensive partnership to foster consistent high-level engagement on democracy and civil society, education, security, resilience and mitigation, maritime, energy, and trade issues, among others. Based on its success, in 2015, the two countries upgraded the relationship to the U.S.-Indonesia Strategic Partnership, extending cooperation to issues of regional and global significance. U.S. goods and services trade with Indonesia totaled an estimated $30.0 billion in 2020. Exports were $9.3 billion, imports were $20.7 billion. The U.S. goods and services trade deficit with Indonesia was $11.5 billion in 2020. Indonesia is currently U.S. 24th largest goods trading partner with $27.6 billion in total, two-way, goods trade during 2020. Goods exports totaled $7.4 billion, goods imports totaled $20.2 billion. The U.S. goods trade deficit with Indonesia was $12.8 billion in 2020. Trade and services with Indonesia, exports and imports, totaled an estimated $2.4 billion in 2020. Services exports were $1.9 billion, services imports were $518 million. The U.S. services trade surplus with Indonesia was $1.4 billion in 2020. Exports. Indonesia was the United States' 33rd largest goods export market in 2020. The top export categories in 2020 were mineral fuels, oilseeds and oleaginous fruits, soybeans, machinery, food waste, animal feed, and wood pulp. U.S. total exports of agricultural products to Indonesia totaled $2.8 billion in 2020, U.S. 11th largest agricultural export market. Leading domestic export categories include soybeans, dairy products, wheat, cotton, and other feeds, meals and fodders. Imports. Indonesia was the United States' 21st largest supplier of goods imports in 2020. The top import categories in 2020 were electrical machinery, knit apparel, woven apparel, rubber, and furniture and bedding. U.S. total imports of agricultural products from Indonesia totaled $2.4 billion in 2020, U.S. 17th largest supplier of agricultural imports. Leading categories include vegetable oils, industrial alcohols and fatty acids, cocoa paste and cocoa butter, unroasted coffee, and spices. Number 3. Indonesia and Japan. Japan is Indonesia's largest export partner and also a major donor of development aid to Indonesia through Japan International Cooperation Agency. Indonesia is a vital supplier of natural resources such as liquefied natural gas to Japan. Both countries are members of the G20 and APEC. Today in Indonesia, there are about 11,000 Japanese expatriates, whereas in Japan, there are approximately 24,000 Indonesian nationals working and training. In 2020, Japan exported $9.24 billion to Indonesia. The main products that Japan exported to Indonesia are motor vehicles, parts and accessories, hot-rolled iron, and cars. In 2020, Indonesia exported $14.4 billion to Japan. The main products that Indonesia exported to Japan were coal briquettes, precious metal scraps, and petroleum gas. Number 4. Indonesia and Singapore. Indonesia and Singapore established diplomatic relations on September 7, 1967, a month after the formation of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, on August 8, 1967. Indonesia and Singapore are two of the 5 founding members of ASEAN, including Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines. Both nations are also members of the Non-Aligned Movement and APEC. Over the years, Indonesia and Singapore have maintained regular exchanges of high-level visits, underpinned by strong economic cooperation across a wide range of sectors, including health, defense, and the environment. In the past decade, Singapore has consistently been Indonesia's top foreign investor. In 2020, Indonesia exported $12.6 billion to Singapore. The main products that Indonesia exported to Singapore are gold, petroleum gas, and refined petroleum. During the last 25 years, the exports of Indonesia to Singapore have increased at an annualized rate of 4.93%, from $3.77 billion in 1995 to $12.6 billion in 2020. In 2020, Singapore exported $14.8 billion to Indonesia. The main products that Singapore exported to Indonesia were refined petroleum, gold, and integrated circuits. During the last 25 years, the exports of Singapore to Indonesia have increased at an annualized rate of 7.85%, from $2.23 billion in 1995 to $14.8 billion in 2020. Number 5. Indonesia and India. India and Indonesia established diplomatic relations in 1951. Both countries are neighbors. India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands share a maritime border with Indonesia along the Andaman Sea. India and Indonesia are among the largest democracies in the world. Both are member states of the G20, the E7 countries, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the United Nations. India is one of the largest buyers of coal and crude palm oil from Indonesia and imports minerals, rubber, pulp paper, and hydrocarbons reserves. India exports refined petroleum products, commercial vehicles, telecommunication equipment, bovine meat, animal feed, agriculture products, steel, and plastics to Indonesia. In 2020, India exported $4.55 billion to Indonesia. The main products that India exported to Indonesia are special-purpose ships, semi-finished iron, and frozen bovine meat. In 2020, Indonesia exported $11 billion to India. The main products that Indonesia exported to India were coal briquettes, palm oil, and stearic acid. Indonesia is one of the beautiful countries and archipelagos that has enough attraction to attract tourists. Indonesia is the paradise of the archipelago in the world. Please support Farman's Life channel with your likes so that we have more enthusiasm to post more content. You can also comment your questions to us. If you like to watch and know more about this content, please subscribe to the channel, and by pressing the bell on the side, you will be notified as soon as a new video is released. Thank you for being with us.